Hello and welcome to the Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Deluce, and it's my mission to help you lead a happier, healthier, and more prosperous life, both personally and professionally. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Doc Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by a world-renowned airway and breathing expert, Dr. Roger Price. Roger is a pharmacist with an honors degree in physiology and pharmacology, a master's in applied breathing sciences, as well as degrees in clinical nutrition and remedial massage therapy. He has a particular interest in the behavioral and psychological aspects of ill health and is known for his alternative, health-focused approach to medicine, as opposed to the traditional reactive medicine that we have become so accustomed to. Roger has spent the last 2 decades challenging the way that sleep disorders are being addressed and has been at the forefront of the movement to educate dentists on their role in airway management. His work focuses on sleep issues as the prime reason why we are continuously tired, lack concentration, and develop chronic diseases. Roger is an author and lecturer and consults for airway-based dental practices across the world. He currently resides in Sydney, Australia, and, as you will soon hear, has a distinguished and captivating voice that, to my ear, is a bit of a blend of Sean Connery and James Lipton from the Actors Studio. Some of what we will discuss today includes what correct breathing looks like, both at rest and during exertion, and what can happen if and when we breathe incorrectly, why nasal breathing is essential, the role that oxygen and carbon dioxide play in our breathing, Roger's thoughts on the Wim Hof and Buteyko breathing methods, how epigenetics ties into breathing and malocclusion, where Western medicine has gotten it wrong, a new program that Roger has designed to help children breathe better, and much, much more. As a reminder, if you like the content that we're providing with the Doc Podcast, please be sure to share and download the episodes, as that is how the algorithms track interest in the show. We'd also love to receive a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify if you feel we've earned it. So without further ado, let's get on to today's episode with breathing expert Dr. Roger Price. Enjoy the show, everybody. Welcome to the Doc Podcast, Roger.
Thank you so much, Mike. Nice to finally do it. We've been talking about it for so long.
Agreed. So happy to have you. It's afternoon where I am on the East Coast of the United States, and where you are in Australia, you're in the morning the following day. So thank you so much for coordinating across the continents here.
Well, that's easy for me at 7:15 in the morning, which is, wake up, be bright and bushy-tailed time.
I'd love you to talk a little more about your background. You grew up in South Africa. You've obviously developed an amazing passion for airway and breathing. You are currently, I believe, in your mid-80s, if I'm not mistaken. You do not look or act it. You have definitely tapped into the fountain of youth, and your mind is working at a level that is just fascinating and amazing to me. So I'm excited to share that with the audience and the viewers and listeners today. So just start by just talking a little bit about your background, if you would, and how you got to this point.
All right. I started as a pharmacist in the mid-1950s, only because I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I was 15 years old, and my father said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I don't know." So we tried a couple of things. I ended up as a pharmacist. I graduated at the very famous Rhodes University in Grahamstown in South Africa. Then I came across to the US, and I started to do a master's in Colorado, and South Africa then became a republic. And I was declared a persona non grata and booted out of the country because I was no longer a member of the Commonwealth. I was an alien. So the long and the short of it is, I got fed up with the concept of accepting that a disease exists and what are we going to do about it. And I think let's put things into perspective here. Western medicine is a baby. Western medicine really took off with a 1910 report by Wexner. And his report was commissioned by Carnegie and Rockefeller. And it essentially said, anything that does not fit the mold of these pharmaceutical giants doesn't work. And that's when the whole system was born, the AMA was born, the FDA was born.
This like early 1900s, would that be right around then?
1910,
Yeah.
1912.
Hmm.
So Western medicine is 110 years old.
Hmm.
And I've been around for 85 of those
It's a
110
high
years.
percentage.
Yeah, so to put it into perspective, it's new. We've created the concepts that we then spend billions of dollars in research to almost produce confirmation bias. Western medicine is used by 18% of the world's population. Just let that sink in. 18% of the world's population uses Western medicine, generating over $3 trillion a year in revenue, with the worst outcomes of any of the OECD countries. That's not a great scorecard, is it?
Not so.
But there are parts of the system that are incredible. The surgeries, the microsurgeries, the ability to rebuild a damaged body or a broken body, the sight, the sound, all of these things are wonderful. But when you start dealing with something that isn't a clinical problem, a bone sticking out of your arm which says, hey, you've got a broken bone, and that's when the guesswork starts. And you know, I challenge anybody who's listening, who's ever written a prescription or received a prescription, to find a time when they weren't told, let's try this. Well, meaning, let's try this means I don't know what it's going to do. Instead of somebody being so confident about what they do, to say, let's do this. So this is the difference between what I call medicine and guesswork medicine. You've broken your arm, let's fix it by doing this. You're not feeling well, let's try this, let's try that, let's try the other. So that led me on a path. And the path was a path of being terribly inquisitive, which I have been since a child. And I want to know why. Why does something happen? Not accept the fact, this is happening, this is how you fix it. And unfortunately now in 2025, and for the last 50, 60 years, we have not had a health system. We've had a disease management business. And this has come about because of the conflation of the two words, normal and commonplace. So much dysfunction today is so commonplace that it's regarded as being normal. And unfortunately, we're living in a world where technology has so outstripped our ability to adapt to it that dysfunction is the new function. Abnormal is the new normal. And that is why we're having the problems that we're having today. This has got to stop. And I think it was Washington who said, complaining about something without offering a solution is called whining. Well, there is a solution. And that solution is unpayable to the people who make a lot of money out of sick people. Because well people don't need to spend money on disease. So our whole system has now evolved around this massive dam that is crammed with sick people, with millions of very well-meaning therapists, clinicians, practitioners, all having studied extremely hard and doing really their very best to try and help people who are already sick. How about we find out why they're sick and then stop this from happening? So here comes the shocking fact. Check the World Health Organization statistics. 74.3% of all deaths in the OECD countries come from non-communicable disease.
74.3. Wow.
Now just let that one sink in. Non-communicable disease. Well, if you didn't get it, if you didn't catch it, where did you get it from? You created it. Why? Because you're stupid? No. Our sole and total focus in life is survival. And if at this point of time, either you or I failed to take the next breath, that will be the end. red and blue lights and sirens, first responders, paramedics, defibrillators, police, what happened. So every single human being does nothing for every microsecond of their existence other than find a way to survive, to take the next breath. And that's what got me into this concept of what is functional breathing. Why do we breathe? What happens when we breathe? And the scary part about this is how little people know or understand about the process of breathing.
Yeah.
And more so, the medical community.
Why do you think that is? Because I so agree with you, and we're going to get into some of these topics because it directly relates to orthodontics and malocclusion. We focus on the fix, we focus on the disease, so to speak, and your inquisitive nature and questioning why. I'm the same way, and I really credit that with the reason behind pursuing additional education, additional knowledge in not just treating malocclusion in teeth, but trying to treat kids at a younger age and more proactively prevent some of these issues from happening, because I was looking at this saying, well, why are they like this? And can I get at it earlier? But why do you think that isn't the norm? I understand the financial side that you're talking about. Certainly, that's a big part of treating disease. That being said, do you feel like it's our educational process where we are just taught to be fixers and reactive? And on the level of breathing, why is this not more heavily discussed and investigated? And why is it controversial?
Yeah. I think the reason is the way the syllabus in medicine and dentistry and other health sciences is structured. Right up in the beginning in year one, we're given concepts. Those concepts don't seem to have any bearing or any meaning on our final goal. So you went to dental school to become a dentist, thereafter to become an orthodontist. So in your first year, you're learning about anatomy and physiology of the whole body and biochemistry. What's that got to do with teeth? I want to become a tooth doctor. The teaching system and the teaching methodology doesn't allow for people to put into perspective how important the fundamentals of basic physiology are. Oh, it's a 40-minute lecture, and I was eyeing this cute chick on the other side of the lecture room, and by the way, she's now my wife. This kind of story. This is what happens. So we miss the essentials. And I've tried this out the last 6 months. I mix with a lot of people. And in conversation, I would say to a very highly qualified osteopath, why do you breathe? And he'll look at me like I have lost my mind. Of course, the answer is to stay alive. Yeah, but what happens when you breathe? Oh, oxygen. Yeah, right. What about oxygen? Well, I take it in and I breathe out carbon dioxide. But how much oxygen does your body need? What? You know the fuel for your car. You know the tire pressure. How much oxygen does there have to be in every breath that you inhale? Is it enough? Is there enough in the air? Can you ever be short? Are you one of these people who say, I don't have enough oxygen? I have to breathe through my mouth to get more oxygen. I have to take bigger breaths and faster breaths to get more oxygen. Are you one of these people who, if you were stopped in the street and somebody said to you, carbon dioxide, good or bad, what would your answer be? And the majority of people would say it's bad.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. So when you ask somebody, do you know what's in the air around you? They kind of look at me like I've lost my mind. I say, well, the air around us is 78% nitrogen, which is inert, 21% oxygen, which makes 99%, and 1% of everything else. And of that 1%...
Of which CO2 is a small percentage of that 1%, correct?
It's 0.04% of that 1%. Now, let's ask the question again. How much oxygen does your body need to be able to saturate your blood to 100%? It only needs 5%. and you're inhaling 21% with every breath. So how on God's green earth could you ever be short of oxygen? You can't. Now, how much carbon dioxide does the body need to function? Well, none. We've got to breathe it all out. It's a toxic waste gas. You could strip wallpaper by breathing on it. No, the body needs 6.5% of carbon dioxide to function. People are stunned when they realize that. And then when you ask the question, well, if there's only less than 0.5% in the air, where do we get it from?
Yep, that's where I was going. You knew.
Whole Foods on a Saturday morning with a brown paper bag, and we go and buy our week's supply of carbon dioxide. And Mike, this is crazy. Children in grade 4, grade 5 should learn how the human body functions. So where do we get our carbon dioxide from? We manufacture it. We make it. Every time we digest food, every time we move, the process of metabolism produces the energy that we need and creates two waste products. And the word organic, again, has a lot to answer for. Organic does not mean very expensive. Organic means it contains carbon. That's all organic means. Consequently, everything that we eat is carbon-based. And when we process the carbohydrates and the sugars and the proteins, etc., we are producing carbon dioxide and water as a byproduct. We should be retaining sufficient to keep our 6.5% and exhaling the balance. That is the way the cycle should work. So that leaves us with a very interesting question. What goes wrong? We're producing the CO2. What happens to our storage and our management systems? And this is where the whole problem starts, because that is all controlled by our breathing.
Paint a picture of what ideal or normal functional breathing, as you called it, would be. And then conversely, when we get to a pathologic state, is that a gradient? Is it an on-off switch? That'd be great to learn a little more about that.
All right. There is no such thing as normal breathing. Breathing has to be adaptive to effort. So you breathe differently sitting here with a pair of headphones on at your desk than you do when you climb 5 flights of stairs to get up to the studio, or when you're running around the racquetball court, or when you're walking, or when you're talking, or when you're presenting and teaching. We're breathing differently all this time because the one absolutely mind-numbing thing that people don't seem to understand, you cannot talk if you can't breathe. You cannot vocalize. You cannot use those vocal folds and those vocal cords to communicate if you are not breathing. So those people who breathe well speak well. Slow, measured, paused, giving the recipient, the audience, the opportunity to grasp what is being said, to mull over it before coming in with the next concept. All right, so to come to your question about what is functional breathing, there is a definition for that. Functional breathing at rest is very similar to being at a traffic light in your motor car with the engine idling. You're waiting for the light to change. What is your rev counter reading while you're idling? 750, 720, 780. It's under 1,000 RPM in most motor cars while you're idling. What would you do if you were sitting at the traffic light and your rev counter was reading 3,000 RPM? You'd be heading off to the dealership because you are conscious of the external over-revving of the engine. Most people today, I would say certainly well in excess of 90% of people today, are sitting quietly revving at 2,500 RPM.
Meaning too many breaths per minute, essentially.
Too many breaths per minute, too much air per breath. They're breathing in excess of the physiological demand But that is their new norm. And this is what we're up against. And if you ask any doctor or any nurse or any hospital, what is normal breathing? Oh, they'll say 12, 14 to 20 breaths per minute. No, that is commonplace breathing with sick people because they only get to see sick people. They don't get to see well people. This is the problem. This is the problem with pathology reports. Pathology reports come from the pathology of people who are not well. You don't get good, well people don't have blood tests unless you get into the biohackers, and that's another world that we can talk about. But essentially, people don't understand that they are overbreathing. And they know that eating for two people and drinking for two people will make you big and fat and drunk. They don't understand that breathing for two people will have equally disastrous effects on your body.
Like what? Can you explain that more?
Well, let's make it simple. You have a swimming pool, and it's a hot day, and you rock up at the swimming pool, and the water is crystal clear and sparkling, and you want to dive in. How would you feel when you get to the swimming pool and it's green and slimy? Are you going to dive in?
No.
So what are you going to do? You take that little plastic test vial and you put in a sample of the water, and it says, add this or add that, and you add it and the water becomes clear and you're ready to swim. Our bodies have 11 swimming pools, and those are the 11 basic functional systems of the human body. Digestive, respiratory, reproductive, endocrine system. All of those, there are 11 of them. So if you can picture, you have this body of 11 swimming pools, and you want to keep them all swimmable. You have to have a particular level of chemicals to address when those pools start going green. And the chemical that keeps your swimming pool clear is carbon dioxide.
Can you say that part again? I want to make sure that people hear that, because I'd be willing to bet most people would have guessed oxygen.
Absolutely. The chemical that keeps your swimming pool from going green is carbon dioxide, because it mixes with water either to make the acid, the carbonic acid that you would need if the pool was too alkaline, or to make the bicarbonate that you would need if the pool was too acidic. And of course, your pool is going to change depending on the number of people who's swimming in it and piddling in it, because that's what happens in each of your systems every day. If you are really involved in something high pressure with high pressure people, you have more people in your pool and you have to adjust it. Well, if your carbon dioxide levels continue to fluctuate, as they do when you don't breathe efficiently, so your pools are all at varying stages of clarity or sliminess. And I find people get that analogy very, very simply. So what goes wrong? There are two kinds of breathing. There's primary breathing, which is what your body needs to maintain the CO2 levels, which represent them as the pH of the particular system. And believe me, the body doesn't have the same pH in every one of its 11 systems. The pH in different systems vary because their functions are different. So there are chemosensors throughout the entire body which are monitoring the level of carbon dioxide all the time. And when those chemoreceptors sense that the carbon dioxide levels are rising, as they do when you've had a big meal or you've been exerting yourself, so they say, well, there is too much CO2 for our pools to be comfortable. Please exhale the excess. And that is the way the body is designed. So primary breathing is to keep the pools clean. Secondary breathing is when they start going green, and you have to use the upper chest and the mouth to get rid of the excess CO2 that you've made. So here comes the problem. It's what I call the Jack Nicholson effect, which is This is as good as it gets. So if over a period of time your behavior patterns change and you are consistently and persistently low CO2, which happens when you breathe through your mouth, when you snore, when you sleep with your mouth open, when you have open mouth posture, as so many people do, and they don't realize that chewing on a pen or sucking on a pen is open mouth posture. So the moment they adopt a particular pattern of behavior which drops their CO2 levels, the chemoreceptors say after a period of time, well, guys, that's all we've got. This is as good as it gets. So the trigger point changes because the body has to keep you breathing, and carbon dioxide is the trigger for the next breath. So it says, well, everything has to be now dumbed down, and we have to breathe with carbon dioxide pressures around about 25 or 30 millimeters of mercury. That's okay. People function like that. The pools are not great, but they're not slimy, a little bit green, and people get used to swimming in slimy pools. That's why they don't feel well. But they don't feel well across all 11 pools. So for them, that's normal. So now what happens is, the moment you exert yourself and you produce more CO2 than the receptors are used to getting, they immediately say, Mike's run a marathon, let's open the mouth and let's make him breathe faster. But it's not true. It is a false flag. It is a false reading because the baseline isn't set correctly. And this is why you can go shopping and you can walk up 5 stairs carrying 4 bags of shopping and you're already breathless. So this brings us to a fascinating topic. What is breathless? What is tight in the chest? What is I can't catch my breath? All these terms that people use for breathing dysfunction. Your chest is tight because the brain is saying to you, Mike, you are losing too much CO2. It's going to turn all your pools green and you're going to die. I'm now going to shut your breathing tubes down so that you're not going to breathe out too much because you're overdoing it, son.
Preserving that blood level of CO2.
Absolutely. That is the bronchoconstriction. That is life-saving.
So it's your body's compensatory mechanism when it senses that the CO2 levels are getting too low. We think we're craving more oxygen, but it's actually our body telling us it's this drive to retain CO2.
To preserve the CO2. So there are 2 mechanisms. The one is to hold your breath. And if you talk to your dental colleagues, you'll find the majority of you hold your breath while you're working.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll come to that in a moment.
Okay, good. Yeah.
All right. So the 2 mechanisms to shoot up the CO2 level, to clear the pools, are you either hold your breath or your tubes narrow. Those are the only 2 ways to bring about the correction within the pH system to stop the pool from going green. Well, when you hold your breath, there's no breath. And the Greek word for no breath is apnea. That's the meaning of apnea, is no breath. Now, everybody thinks apnea is sleep apnea. No, you get daytime apnea as well. Holding your breath is daytime apnea. Why would you do that? And there's a very simple solution to that. Once you've brought the oxygen into the body, how does it get to the 50 trillion cells through the network of 100,000 miles of blood vessels? How does it get to every nook and cranny of your body 24/7? And you're not even guiding it. It goes by train. It goes on what I call the hemoglobin express. So the hemoglobin express is very simple. Your chest is central station. There are 11 locomotives going to the 11 suburbs where the 11 swimming pools are, and behind each locomotive there are millions of little carriages, and each one of these carriages is a molecule of hemoglobin, which is that red protein in the blood. And inside every hemoglobin carriage, there are 4 little metal seats, and that's known as heme iron, and people who are anemic don't have enough of that heme iron in their blood. Good. So if you picture this crazy central station, and the 21% of oxygen passengers are pouring in with every breath, and they're all rushing to the various stations and platforms, when they get to the platform and 4 oxygen passengers approach the hemoglobin carriage, the doors open, the 4 oxygens plop themselves in, each one sits down on its little metal seat, and it locks its chemical seatbelt, because it's one heck of a ride, I can tell you. So you can picture the station is really crazy busy with people rushing all over the place. The train loads up with the oxygen passengers and it sets off on the journey and it gets to the station. Somebody has to make sure that the train stops, that the carriage doors open, that the chemical seat belts are released, and the oxygen passengers are told, time to leave and get to work. Go and fix your swimming pools. Well, who does that on a train? It's your conductor. Now, Michael Deluce, how do you spell conductor?
Starts with a CO, right? Yeah.
CO2, NDUCTOR. Carbon dioxide is the conductor of the orchestra. It's the conductor of the rail system. It's the manager of the pooled system. So this carbon dioxide that everybody says is killing the world is the virtual breath of life. No CO2, no life, no people, no food, no planet, nothing. Vast blankness. And everybody says, oh, CO2 is poison and it's this and it's that. Yeah, I will accept, and by the way, this is not a discussion on climate change. Yes, there is too much CO2 up there, and there's not enough down here. That's about as deeply I'm going to get into it, because I'm only interested in the CO2 down here. So can you see the critical importance of carbon dioxide? It has 3 roles in the body. The one is to manage the transport of the oxygen from the atmosphere to your cells. The other is to maintain your swimming pools in swimming condition. And the third is to control the tension in the tubes, to shut it down if you're losing too much. And here comes the problem. Nothing happens in the human body that does not go through a tube. We are basically a bunch of calamari on 2 feet. That's all we are. And even teeth are made of tubules. So can you imagine if the CO2 levels plummet and the brain says, hey guy, shut those tubes down to mitigate the loss. What other tubes are going to shut down at the same time? All of them. Your blood pressure is going to rise because your cardiovascular system is going to go into spasm. You're going to develop digestive issues because the 27-foot long tube that goes from input to output, that has all these messages coming from the brain to the bands of smooth muscle to say, move this to here and this to here and this to there, that's going to go into chaos. And gee, guess what? The bladder is a tube. So you're lying fast asleep with your mouth wide open. The bladder is a third full. You're snoring like the Santa Fe Railway. And the bladder starts going into spasm. If you're lucky, you wake up and you toddle off to the bathroom once, twice, sometimes 3 times a night. But the bladder's never full, is it? Those nighttime trips are never a full bladder. They're just a pain in the butt. Children sleep so deeply, they don't pick up that signal. That is why there is that direct correlation between bedwetting children and the benefits of getting them to sleep with their mouths closed, whether you do it through palatal expansion, whether you do it through a myobrace or one of those, it doesn't matter what you do. But to prevent the fluctuations in CO2 during the night, through the mouth breathing and the snoring, and the big breaths and the huffing and puffing as you turn from side to side, your body is going through chaos the entire night. Up, apnea, no breath. So while this is happening, the brain is saying, hey, guy, you're driving me nuts here. CO2 is dropping, I'm making you hold your breath, apnea. Eventually the CO2 rises, it releases some oxygen to the brain. The brain says, thank God I'm alive again. Take the next breath, and the next breath is a huge sigh. So you're lurching in and out the entire night. Your pools are going blue to pale green to dark green. You wake up exhausted in the morning because of the fight to survive. Does this kind of put it into perspective?
Beautifully. And I love the analogies you use with the pools and the train and the central station. A couple things that I really would say pretty confidently. Most people probably don't know that breathing is CO2 driven, right? I think if you went and asked most people, they would say oxygen.
That is true to a point. When the brain detects hypoxia,
Sure, right.
and this is going to bring us to why you hold your breath while you're working.
Yep.
When you demand maximum performance from the brain is going to say, hey, fella, you want me to work hard? Feed me. I need more oxygen to concentrate on getting that particular crown settled in the right place. Therefore, you hold your breath momentarily to push up the CO2 to release more oxygen from the train so that your brain can function at its optimal level. So people hold their breath while they're concentrating because the brain takes up 25% of the energy of the human body. It's a very hungry monster.
What does that do to the pools?
Well, temporarily they go green. But then, of course, when you've held your breath and the CO2 is ridden high enough, the pools will start to clear. Okay. But what is exhausting is when you're taking them from slimy to clean, from slimy to clean the entire night. Because you should not be in bed for 8 hours, sleeping and wake up tired. You've done nothing for those 8 hours. When you wake up, you should be ready to get up. And most people are not.
And especially to children. This is where I get so frustrated with my profession because we see some of these kids young. We could make the case the orthodontist should be seeing them younger than we do, but separate discussion for a separate day. But we see them young. Let's just call it even. We see them at 6, 7 years old sometimes. Roger, we're not even asking these questions about breathing and airway. We put it on the physician. The physicians, I've had 2 children go through the system. I have very many family and friends who are physicians, pediatricians. This isn't on their radar, right? Again, different discussion as to why not and how we can improve that. I'm more focused on what we can do. Instead of passing the buck to our medical colleagues, why is there such resistance? Why do people like myself and those of us who understand the importance of proper nasal breathing at any age, especially when you see it in these young children, you have to try to do something about it. Why do you think that's such a hard concept for people to understand? And I'll take it one step further. Why do they continue to deny the concept of epigenetics and that when they do that, there are these negative sequelae behaviorally, psychosocially, from a growth and development standpoint? Why is that hard for people to understand?
There was a very wonderful American philosopher. His name was Wayne Dyer. And Wayne and I were twins by 4 days. And we became friends. And he unfortunately passed away in 2015, much too early. And one of Wayne's sayings was, it is not so much the lack of understanding of the new, it is the resistance to let go of the old. Many doctors and dentists and orthodontists understand what we're saying because it's not complicated.
Right, right. That's
They
exactly.
just cannot let go of the old.
Mm,
And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is they're afraid of malpractice suits. They're afraid of their board saying you're operating outside the scope of your
mm,
license. They're afraid of all of these peer pressure things, which are saying you are not like us.
mm.
Therefore, you are on the outside and we are going to castigate you.
Yeah.
Here in Australia, it's called the tall poppy syndrome. The moment you have the field of poppies and one sticks out, somebody's going to come along and is going to cut it off
Hmm.
because you're not the same as us anymore.
Hmm.
And I've been fighting this for 30 years.
Yeah.
I have a favorite brick wall against which I bang my head
Yeah.
daily. But I'm happy to say that brick wall is crumbling.
I do feel that way. Yeah. What makes you say that? Yeah.
Attrition. You cannot bang away at something without making a mark. And it was that wonderful American philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, who said of the truth goes through three stages. Firstly, it is violently opposed. Secondly, it's ridiculed. And finally, it's accepted as being self-evident. And believe me, I've gone through the ridicule phase. Oh, this guy's a kook. He's nuts.
Hmm.
He's crazy. And this is where that awful disconnect comes with these three words of evidence-based medicine.
Yeah. Talk about that.
The origin of evidence-based medicine was Dr. David Sackett in 1976. And evidence-based medicine has been prostituted and connived and twisted to mean if it doesn't come out of a medical journal, it is not evidence-based.
Mm.
And that is not true, because Sackett's evidence-based medicine was the intersection of three circles. And the first circle was the skill and the expertise of the clinician.
Hmm.
The second circle was the outcome and the satisfaction of the patient. And the third was the best and most appropriate research available at the
Hmm.
time. And EBM, evidence-based medicine, is that tiny little oval
Mm.
where these three circles intersect. Anybody want to Google EBM Sackett, you'll find the Venn diagram. And that explains exactly what evidence-based medicine is. But no. If it's not written up in the BMJ and the Journal of East England and the Lancet, etc., it doesn't exist.
Mm.
Well, Carl Sagan said it best, didn't he? He said, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Hmm.
Because somebody hasn't tried something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And every dogma and every skerrick of research started off as a hypothesis.
Yep.
Somebody said, what do you think, or what would happen if we tried this?
Hmm.
And the hypothesis then becomes factual, but unfortunately the facts are not always accurate, because those facts are subject to manipulation, to cherry picking, to marketing, to return on investment. There's no honesty anymore, Mike.
Mm.
You cannot trust anything that you see or hear. And I lived in the US for 7 years. I lived there from 2012 to 2019. And I used to watch on television the advert for this latest drug. And it was a 60-second advert, of which 57 seconds was green fields and blue skies and happy grandpas throwing around grandchildren, saying how incredible this new heart drug was.
Hmm.
And the last 13 seconds at 500 miles an hour were all the things that it could do to you, including kill you. This system is wrong.
Obviously there's a lot of money involved, and to your point before of what you're saying of, the fear of change is harder than accepting the reality of what is correct. I hypothesize about where this is coming from so that we can start to focus our efforts and fix it. And I often come back to what I call the academia private practice divide. In those circles you were referencing, research would be more in the academic realm, so to speak, typically. And then the other two circles would be kind of what's happening more in private practice, right? And I feel like that intersection that you were referencing, which is EBM, evidence-based medicine, everyone's kind of fighting over who's right and who owns a bigger part of that inner circle of the Venn diagram. Why is that? And how can we start to bridge that gap? Because a lot of the clinicians, when I talk to people about this, it seems the clinicians, especially the younger clinicians, they get it. So
Yeah.
how do we get academia and the academic establishments to be open to exploring some of these new ways of thinking?
All right. It's not a particularly long answer, and the answer is we don't, and we can't.
I didn't see that coming. Explain that.
Because they're too entrenched in what they're doing. What has happened is, let's go back. When was the human body designed? Nobody knows. Some say several million years ago. The conventional truth is about 300,000 years ago in Africa, which is where I was born. And that particular cave in which they found this very, very, very old fossil was very close to where I lived. So let's assume the human body was designed 300,000 years ago. I have learnt in 85 very difficult years never to make guarantees or say anything specific, because somebody's going to pick me up on it and say you're wrong. But I will give you a guarantee that 300,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago, we did not have saturated Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and LEDs and fluorescent lighting and 130,000 new toxic chemicals that have been created since the end of World War II. We didn't have the challenges that we have today. And we blithely think that we've adapted. Well, we haven't. We have maladapted. And dysfunction has become the new function, and everybody's doing it. So in July last year, and we'll come to this a little later, I spent a month in Romania with my ground team. And we went to 3 government-run Romanian kindergartens with 400 children. And we did a 5-stage evaluation on those children leaving school in July, because that was the end of their 3-year kindergarten period. And they were all just about 6 years old. And we took 65 children, and we put them through these 5 stages. And the 5 stages were height, weight, dental evaluation, occlusal evaluation, tethers, swallowing, phonation, coordination, proprioception, breathing, being able to sit still, whatever. 63 out of 65 children failed on 5 out of 7 milestones.
Whoa.
But that was normal, and the Inspector General of the Education Division was there with us, and she said, but these children are all normal. We said, no, the only 2 normal ones are the 2 who are the outliers. The rest is all commonplace. And it's tragic to say that those 63 out of 65 children are special needs children. They could not sit still for 20 seconds without fidgeting. Most of them could not stand on one leg without having to try and balance themselves. Their proprioception was out. The amount of retained primitive reflexes in those children was mind-numbing. But nobody knew what to look for. So why are children retaining these reflexes into adulthood, where they become manifest? It's because nobody knew what to look for when they were smaller.
And what's causing it in the smaller kids?
Ah, you got it. It's the lack of knowledge preconception. It's the lack of understanding of what goes on during gestation. It's the lack of energy at specific parts in the gestational cycle. It's the lack of hydration. It's the lack of nutrition. It's the excess of stress. It's not enough energy at the time when the apoptotic processes should start to differentiate the organisms. Then it's the birth process. How many natural births are there today? There's virtually no such thing as a natural birth, other than those parents who say we want a water birth, we want a home birth, we want to go to a birthing unit. But you have to be very privileged to be able to afford that kind of stuff. So when the baby comes into this world, and its entry into this world is traumatic, as it is with very long labor, as it is with epidurals, as it is with Pitocin induction, with vacuum extraction, with forceps, with all of these things that can and do go wrong. What does the infant do when it enters this world? It takes its first breath. And if there's a problem taking that first breath, you think there's going to be a problem taking the second one and the third? So the infant has a choice. I either compensate or I die. Do you recall how many breaths a day a baby takes in its first 6 months of life?
No.
I have not asked that question of one medical professional who's been able to give me the answer. Between 60 and 70,000 breaths a day for the first 6 months of life. So here's the hypothesis. Do you think it's possible that if the baby is struggling with every breath, that is going to start develop compensations right away?
Sure.
Do you think it's possible that those compensations might be responsible for the primitive reflexes not integrating in time? And so the cascade starts not with the first breath, but with the epigenetics taking place during gestation, which is not expressed from the mother, it's expressed from the grandmother. Because the mother is expressing her epigenetic problems, which are then transferring themselves to the child. So you cannot change your genetics. And every genetic trait in your body has the opportunity to express itself fully or partially. And that depends, and this is where the nature and the nurture comes in.
Yep.
That depends on how you enter this world and how able you are to allow your body to express its genetic potential in full. Now, you would have remembered the name Melvin Moss.
Of course. I talk about him often. Yeah. 62 was when he first released his functional matrix hypothesis.
62. Let's talk about it like a building. This is the penthouse, the skull. Does the size of the skull determine the size of the brain? Or does the genetic potential of the brain continue to develop the growth of the skull? And of course, what Moss said in his day was so controversial. He stood up and he said, bone does not grow. And everybody thumped the ground and said, of course bone grows. No, he says, bone is grown. And it's grown through the application of consistent forces and pressures, which take the osteoblasts that are resident in the structure and cause them to lay down skeletal and cranial bone. Okay, they said, we'll let you off on that one. So obviously the skull will grow to the size, the genetic size of the brain. That's the penthouse. Let's come to level one, the eyes. Is the size of the eyeball dictated to by the size of the orbit in the skull? Or is it the pressure of the growing eyeball that causes the orbit to grow to its genetic potential? So you've got the force of the growing brain increasing the size of the skull, and you've got the force of the growing eyeball defining the size of the orbit. Let's come down to basement level. let's come down to the maxilla. What is the force that drives the growth of the maxilla to its genetic potential? It's the tongue. So you're not in control about the force that your eyeballs exert or the force that your brain exerts, but you are in control or semi-control of the force that your tongue exerts. And the moment you have these birth complications, the moment you have tethers, the moment you have C-sections, the moment you have something that affects the baby's ability to breastfeed or to swallow or to breathe, the tongue drops.
Mm-hmm.
Because the minute you part your lips and you open your mouth, your tongue drops from the roof of the mouth where it should be down to the floor of the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So what is happening now is we're missing that consistent force of the tongue against the alveolar ridge to drive the maxilla to its genetic potential.
Mm-hmm.
And that is soft foods, that is inability to breastfeed for a long time, it's bottles, it's pacifiers, it's all of these things that interfere with the muscle mechanics of the mouth. So 97% of people have a deviated septum. Why? The septum is a cartilage. It's attached to the nasal bone and it's attached to the maxilla. Well, if the nasal bone and the maxilla don't grow at the same ratio, the cartilage is going to kink. So what's happening is this part of the skull is growing, but the maxilla is being held back. Therefore, the cartilage develops a kink in it. It's like if you squash the sides of a cardboard box.
Mm-hmm.
These sides go in and the other sides pop out. Oh no, it's genetic. Everybody has got a deviated septum because their fathers had a deviation. No. So you can see the woolly-headed thinking that is going on, not because people are stupid. It's the education system is trying to cram into 4 years, 20 years of required learning because it's become too technological.
On that, have you seen you would love it. If not, I can send it to you. Kevin Boyd told me about this. There was an article, a series done by a gentleman named Timothy Bromage. I think he was out of Columbia as well. Well, Melvin Moss was. And he talked about the functional matrix. So one of the things in your apartment complex there, kind of above the basement floor, they're called maybe ground level, is the functional matrix of the craniofacial respiratory complex is air. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, so you have the tongue as one impediment, if that tongue isn't in the right place, shaping the maxilla. And if you're mouth breathing and you're not breathing through the nose, you're not developing the nasal passageways and the sinuses. And I've seen so many cases with cone beam on younger patients where they've got just hypoplasia of the maxillary sinuses and these underdeveloped nasal passageways. And when you go in and perform various different modalities and interceptive treatment to normalize the anatomy, they will literally, in a year, you look at these images a year apart, Roger looks like a different human being. The sinuses start to develop, the nasal passageways start to develop. And again, there can be many reasons for this. I'm simplifying it and what you have to do to intervene. But the point is, when you start to normalize that anatomy and get the tongue in the right place and get the breathing to be appropriate, their whole face grows differently.
Of course it does. This is such a thing called cause and effect. Mm-hmm. You cannot have an effect if there's no cause. And if when that baby is born, if there are left side bends or right side bends or cranial distortion, which you normally get with the C-section, you don't get those final hard muscle contractions of the uterus, pushing everything into place and folding over the shoulders and squashing the liquid out. So my personal belief is that every non-normal birth, there should be a really well-trained cranio-osteopath present, and to take that baby's head and to feel that everything is in balance, that those 21 bones of the skull, and of course everybody's going to correct me and say, no, they're 22 bones. No, they're not. The 22nd bone is the mandible, which hangs off the skull. It's not part of the cranial structure. They should feel that these bones, the temporal and the zygomatic, and all of those processes are nice and balanced. And if that doesn't happen, you as an orthodontist get to see a child not voluntarily. They come to see you because there is something wrong. You're not the cause of the problem. You didn't cause the jaws to become narrow or whatever. But a lot of the old traditional orthodontics doesn't do a lot of good either. So it's a case of not being guilty, but also not being innocent. But that's another topic that we can talk about forever. So we want to look at what is the origin of the issue. The origin is out of balance. And surviving and creating compensations which are valid at that particular moment. But if you repeat them thousands of times a day, this is what causes dysfunction. And that is why this last part of my life is totally dedicated to early education and intervention, not doctors, not dentists, not pediatricians. If I hear one more time he'll grow out of it, I want to smack somebody upside the head.
Just had it happen at the residency last week. We have a young child who's suffering to breathe, and the ENT told the mom he'll grow out of it, and
No, he won't. He'll grow into it.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully, mom's going to see someone else. But so, how do we break the cycle? If you can in this, I'd love you to talk and touch on breathing exercises and training to tie it into that with what a lot of people do. You and I have spoken a little bit about box breathing or Wim Hof approach, Buteyko breathing. How do you break the cycle? And can things like that actually help if you get to be older, or can you do that with children?
Well, yeah. In the Afrikaans language and in the Dutch language, there's a beautiful word called ja nee, which is yes, no. And it's a very valuable word that we can use. And the answer is ja nee. Let's talk about prevention first.
Yep.
If we can educate parents, kindergarten teachers, district nurses, in how to look for the canary in the coal mine, in how to look for that very first subclinical sign of dysfunction forming, we can prevent the non-communicable disease from progressing. We can intervene young enough, and that is what we're doing in Romania. We're doing this in France. We're about to do this in Kazakhstan, in Belarus, in Dubai. This is the charity that I founded back in 23, the IOPI charity, and that's another topic for discussion. But to get to where you are with what do we do once the problem has happened? Well, unfortunately, there are not a lot of Wim Hofs around. You need to be very dedicated. And you cannot live your life that kind of breathing. You cannot live your life doing yoga breathing. You cannot take dysfunction, which has taken a long time to form, and correct that 1 hour a week every Friday by going to a yoga class, very often run by somebody who has 6 weeks of training and is just buffed and bronzed and looks fantastic, but really doesn't have a clue. And Buteyko breathing, I've been involved with it since the 90s, the early 90s. It is a non-drug. It is a non-drug intervention for breathing dysfunction. It doesn't address the reason for the breathing dysfunction. And the breathing dysfunction comes from the body being out of balance, trying its ultimate to keep those swimming pools swimmable. Because to change the pH of a green pool, you have to change your breathing pattern, because you have to manage your CO2 levels to the point that you can shift the pH so that the pool becomes functional again.
But if breathing's a reflex, how do you train it?
You don't. And that is the problem. You cannot train a reflex. You cannot teach somebody how to breathe. The body knows what it needs. I've been doing this for 30 years, Mike, and I teach people how to get out of the way and to stop manipulating their breathing and to allow their bodies to breathe them, not to try and learn a technique to breathe their bodies.
Can you tell us
That
what
is
that
the
looks
subtle
like?
difference. Well, yes, it is very simple. It doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that people have to learn that they are important. And you stop any person, particularly a woman, particularly a mom, and you say, who's the most important person in your life? And invariably she's going to say, my family, my child, my husband, etc. No, she's wrong. She is the most important person in her life. Because the better I am, the better I am for those around me. And the more balanced and the calmer and the more peaceful my life, the more peace I exude for people around me. And people think that self-care is selfish. No, it's not. It is selfless. So the very first thing that you have to do, if you want to allow your body to breathe itself to its demand, is to learn how to get out of the way. And you have to change the habits that you created as compensations because they are not doing you any good. Of course, the most ridiculous thing anybody can ever do is to tell somebody to do something that you know they're not going to do. And doesn't that happen all the time? Doctors, physiotherapists, chiropractors tell people what to do. They don't do it. Compliance is terrible because it means changing a habit. And you know how to eat an elephant? One
One bite
little
at a
piece
time.
at a time. The same with changing a habit. You need to change it one bit at a time. And about 10 years ago, with my two sons, we wrote an app that helps to do this. And that app requires a commitment. And the commitment is 26 minutes out of an entire day. You've done it.
I have done it. Yes, and it is a commitment,
Right.
but it has helped me. I will be honest, it has helped me.
10 minutes in the morning, 3 times during the day, you take a break for 2 minutes. Believe me, the United States is not going to shut down if Mike Deluce does nothing for 2 minutes.
For sure.
It might not even notice, all right?
Probably not, maybe, but
It probably won't even notice. And the reason we designed it this way was that habits are created little by little over a period of time.
Yep.
Habits have to be changed little by little over a period of time. But the good news is it's taken 41 years to create a habit. It doesn't need to take 41 years to change that habit.
Mhm.
Provided people comply, normally 90 to 120 days is sufficient. But they have to comply. And that is why we built into the back end that buddy feature, etc., etc. So the answer to the question is, firstly, don't let it happen. Prevention is better than cure. Don't let it happen. Pick up the warning signs, that canary in the coal mine, really, really early on, first breath. But doctors and dentists are not going to do that because it's not in their training. It's not that they don't want to. It's that you can just put so much into 4 years as you can fit into 4 years.
Mhm.
That is why this whole concept of multidisciplinary medicine is wrong. It is individual silos.
Yep.
There are 131 specialties in medicine, and not one is the mouth. Oh, the mouth is that, that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That
what
we have
dentists
dentists to worry.
do.
We have dentists to worry about, right?
Yes. So tell me, the ear and the nose and the throat are not perhaps connected somehow through the mouth?
I don't know. I must have missed that day of anatomy.
Yeah, yes, I was busy eyeing the cute girl at the other end of the lecture room. Okay. So what we have here is we have a disconnect from the beginning. I'm in favor of interdisciplinary because if you have to go and see 4 specialists, it's 4 initial consultations, it's 4 histories, it's 4 lots of bloods, it's all of these things because everybody is working in their silo. Our interdisciplinary teams, our dream teams, all work off the same record. So everybody knows what everybody else is doing.
Imagine that, right? My goodness.
And of course, and this is the hard part, the dentist should not be the starting point. The dentist should be the end point. Because if your car is involved in a smash, do you take it to be painted straight away? Just spray over all the
Mm,
damage? No, you have it assessed. If the frame is bent, the frame is straightened. If the suspension is out of balance, it's retuned. The tires are replaced, the wheels are balanced, the dents are fixed. Everything is sanded and then sent to be sprayed.
mm,
Before a dentist or an orthodontist should touch a mouth, the underlying causes of the dysfunction need to be addressed.
mm. Or even, I mean, I'd settle at this point for recognized or discussed.
Exactly.
I feel like now it's just ignored, right?
Because the concept is orthodontic means straight teeth.
Hmm.
The teeth are crooked. My job is to make them straight,
Right,
not to
right,
worry about why they're crooked.
right. Sure.
That's not my job. My job is brackets and wires, come back every 6 weeks, just six, put a talk on four, etc. Done, beautiful prom smile. Have you ever in your career ever come across a perfectly symmetrical face?
Never.
So why would you put perfectly symmetrical teeth into an asymmetrical face
Hmm.
and not expect a problem?
To your point, the more
That's not my job.
asymmetrical the face, the more difficult the orthodontic case to prove your point.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yep,
But no,
without
no, no.
without a
We
doubt.
want that prom smile.
Right.
So we'll compensate, or we'll ignore, or we'll extract, or we'll talk, or we'll tad, or we'll do something.
Right.
But the problem isn't there. The problem is probably in the pelvis, or in the feet, or in the SI joints, or in the cervical spine, because the force of that part of the body is so much greater than the occlusion of the jaws. And particularly in sleep medicine, they apply an appliance, a mandibular appliance.
Hmm.
What position is the patient in when that adjustment is made? They're semi-recumbent in the chair,
Hmm.
and the patient stands up, and the head goes forward, and the shoulders tilt, and the butt goes back, and the tummy goes forward, and the legs tilt. What is that doing to that fine adjustment that's just been made in a
Hmm.
semi-recumbent position? We've got to learn to work from the bottom up, not to try and work from the top down. And that is the problem. There's no time. People are not prepared to spend the money. They want a quick fix.
Hmm.
This is the killer today. Lord, give me patience and hurry. You
Yeah.
can't hurry patience. You can't take a lifetime of dysfunction and give it a pill and say, let me continue eating McDonald's every day of my life and just put me on statins and all other kinds of things to counteract the damage that's being done.
Hmm.
We can't do that, but that is what is being done.
Yeah. And it's hard to undo because of the money behind it and the system and everything else
You
involved.
cannot
It's
undo it.
yeah.
You can only change the input attitude from the parent.
Mm.
This will not change from the inside out. This will change will be forced from the outside in. The problem is that what we do makes sense. It doesn't make dollars.
Yeah. So true. It's so true.
Prevention does not make money, but
In the part
prevention
diagnostic part.
saves billions.
Mm.
This is the issue. 75% World Health Organization, 91% from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Deaths come from non-communicable diseases.
Mm.
We are not living longer, Mike. We're dying longer.
Mm. Without a doubt. Our health span, as we call it, is less and lower, I would be willing
Yeah,
to say. Our lifespans may have
that's right.
somewhat increased, although we can make a case that in recent decades has not held true. But
No,
come back to when you're talking about your app, the changes, because I want to touch on that a little more, and then I want to finish by you talking a little bit more about the IOP and let people know how they can learn more about that. But with your app,
yeah.
because people might hear 26 minutes a day might sound like a lot. I found that it was actually good for me to stop because we sometimes, I can be very guilty of this, take ourselves a little too seriously and think that the world will stop if we stop, right? We think that
Yeah.
if I'm not doing, and the days that I'm not as good on it, because I still continue with it and I'm not perfect every day, I do find that the days I do it, not just my breathing habits are impacted, but my overall mental state and peace of mind is somewhat impacted. I find that time is very reflective for me and I'm able to use it. And there's a lot of evidence behind meditation and breathing is a part of meditation. So, what are you doing now with the app? And I would be more than happy to put that as a reference for people to be able to access because I think it's awesome.
Certainly. And we made it free, as I explained to you. When
Yeah.
we developed the app, we said, let's pay forward into life
Yeah.
some of the bounties that we've derived.
Mm-hmm.
It was a decision that we made 10 years ago, but there are changes coming. And I know that I'm preempting quite a few things, but that's what these conversations are all about. Let's get to this question of measuring carbon dioxide. It's not easy. Well, yes, it is easy, but it hasn't always been easy. Normally, it was done through blood gases. We had to take a long needle and you had to
Mm-hmm.
go down until you found an artery and take arterial blood and send it to the lab.
Mm-hmm.
The hospital used capnometry.
Mm-hmm.
Capnometry is not in common usage in any of the professions. And so much so that in sleep, with sleep studies, and they do occasionally do capnometry, they're only looking for high CO2.
Interesting.
They're ignoring it when it's low.
Interesting.
Oh, it's low, it's fine.
Mm.
No, it's not. When it's high, it's okay. And they're looking for the high CO2, which is an indicator of apnea. Because the more you hold your breath and the more you stop breathing, the higher the CO2 goes.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize the loop gain. They don't realize all of these biochemical things that they haven't studied. Basically, it is not a sleep problem. You don't wake up because you can't sleep. You wake up because you can't breathe. And if anybody wants to argue that, just look at what are your two prime interventions for sleep disordered breathing: a breathing machine and a breathing appliance.
Yep.
They're not a sleep machine or a sleep appliance. The reality is it is breathing disordered sleep. It is that body's need to breathe because of its biochemical imbalance that wakes you up while you're sleeping. But that's, as they say, a whole nother story.
Yep.
All right. Well, about 25 years ago, a very smart guy in the US developed a box which was a biofeedback carbon dioxide monitor. And it changed the face of everything. But it was unfortunately too expensive for the average person to use. It's like $3,500 US, and it's not a wearable. And people people will spend $750 on an Aura ring. They'll spend $1,400 on a Garmin. They're not going to spend $4,000, right? Well, I'm currently working with a Swedish physicist to design a wearable capnometer.
Mm.
And we're aiming to bring it to market at around $250. So the goal here is to mate that with the Address Stress app so that while you are actually getting out of the way, you're able to monitor how your body is responding.
Mm-hmm. And Roger, that's so exciting because that was the one piece that I felt, and I do feel I don't have, is how is my body, how are my swimming pools changing, or are they, right?
And this again is the problem with heart rate variability because HRV has become very popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people are told your coherent breathing rate should be 6 breaths per minute, 40% inhale, 60% exhale.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's true
Mm-hmm.
for some people, but not everybody's the same. With heart rate variability, I have had so many people whose mechanical breathing is perfectly coherent, but their chemistry is terrible. Their CO2 levels are hovering around the 25 millimeter mark,
Mm.
but they think they're doing it correctly.
Mm.
So this is what we're working on at the moment. We have a prototype out that's working. We're trialing it in various environments,
Mm.
but we believe we can bring it to market for around $250.
Well, if you need me to assist with any beta testing, I'm offering my
And that's
services.
going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
And of course, we're doing this to make it easier to determine how your swimming pools are behaving.
Yeah.
And when I said with the swimming pool, you take the test kit
Mm.
and you pour the water in and you pour in the reagents, this little capnometer is going to be the test kit.
Mm.
Being biofeedback, you will be able to see instantaneously that as you change your pattern, so your pool will change color.
Mm.
And we live in a visual world. People have to see. They have to see something change in front of their eyes. So this is all exciting. I have a book coming out,
Mm.
and I'm not releasing the book until the capnometer is ready. Because what is the point in getting everybody excited, as you were, about measuring your swimming pool and not having a device with which to do it?
Right. Right.
So the title of the book is Inspire, and it's deliberately done that way because inspire is to breathe, and an inspiration is an inhalation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also the inspiration to do something by explaining why. And a lot of books that have been written are boring. They're technical tomes made up of cut and paste from physiology books, etc. The book by James Nestor was great because he is an author. He is a writer. He wrote a story and he wove into his story the scientific part.
Yeah.
I'm doing exactly the same. James ended his book getting people to understand CO2 is not the enemy. I'm going to pick up from that point and explain where it comes from, how you make it, what happens. The whole swimming pool, the whole railway station. I use an orchestra. You go into the local symphony hall and there are 11 maestro musicians. You think, my God, this is the cream of the musical world. And they all start playing their own favorite music at their own volume and their own tempo. How long do you think people will sit in that hall?
Not long.
The conductor has to come in with the baton and tap the stand and say, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are playing Debussy. Already? This is the conductor of the 11 prime musicians, of the 11 swimming pools, of the 11 railway stations. This is the CONDUCTOR.
Mm.
Well, if we can't measure it, how do we know we're doing it right?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
it's so
this is a
great.
challenge. I mean, bigger people and smarter people have tried to do this. And again, I remember from my dad, he was a character. He was born in 1900. And he used to say to me when I got frustrated, he used to say, son, if it was easy, somebody else would have done it by now. The only failure is stopping. And I don't know the word no, and I don't know the word you can't. Maybe you can't, that doesn't mean I can't.
Mm.
And that's what keeps me. I'm in great health. I'm in great spirits. I run around the world like a demented teenager on speed. And
Yeah.
without passion, there's no life.
Nothing. Nothing. That's why I'm on this journey. Passion. It's a passion
Yeah.
to change the way things are done. And once you have
Yeah.
that passion for something, and it's evident in your work. So I thank you so much for that. Before we close up, just can you just tell people how they can learn more about IOPE because it's such a cool project? Is there a
Okay.
website we can go to? And I'll put links in the show notes too, for sure.
The website is very simple. It is IOPE.org. It's a registered charity. It's a non-profit. It's there for the health of future generations. We believe that people should pay forward the benefits that they're enjoying.
Mm.
And when I talk to a room full of dentists and orthodontists, I say, do you realize that your entire success, monetary, educational, practical, is based on working on damaged people. Wouldn't it be nice to pay just a little bit forward to prevent people from becoming damaged? Don't worry, there are a couple of billion people for you
Right,
still to
right,
work with.
right, right. None of us are going to see the
You're
day
not going to
when we
run out of,
eradicate the damage, right?
yeah, you're going to be 7,000 years old when that happens.
Yeah, yeah.
And we make a very simple request. $1,000. That's all. That for a practice is Oreos for a week, right? In the staff room. $1,000 in any busy practice is not even money. And we've got a donate button on the website. And all anybody has to do, if they have any kind of heart or feeling for the health of future generations of children, is to support what we do. We don't make money out of this. It's a charity. We go into different countries and we teach teachers what to look for. And we run education programs in various languages for parents and for school groups. And we show them what an open mouth posture does. And we show them how a child sitting on an exercise ball has a better posture than a child sitting in a chair that's too big for it. This is simple,
Any hope of it coming to
but
the
simple.
U.S.?
Well, I mean, half my board is in the US. But the trouble with the US is there's too much money. Too many people have $10,000 put aside into the child's orthodontic fund when the child is born. Look, Jimmy's going to have braces, so here's his college fund and here's his orthodontic fund. The reason that we are so beautifully accepted in the less wealthy countries is they don't have that kind of money. And they bless us for a simple, low-cost intervention that prevents them having to find the money and borrow the money. So this is why we want to work with local government and local school boards. And we can't compete with industry. They don't like us.
Well, maybe once you collect the data of a few years of this or more, and then you can bring it to the U.S. and show the politicians how much
Well,
money can
Mike,
be saved, then maybe we can actually start to enact some of this change.
IOP has got 6 programs. What we're talking about now is program number 5, which is getting in at kindergarten level. Our first program is preconception education, to explain to a soon-to-be parents what is actually involved. Nobody knows. They know the physical side of it and the Big Bang, and that's that, but they don't know what happens after that. They don't know how to prepare for that. The second program is 40 weeks. Let's go through what happens in the factory. What materials do you need? What energy do you need? What water do you need? Let's bring this down to simplified ways of looking at life. Good. Program number 3 is the birth process and what can go wrong. Program number 4 is the first 1,000 days of life, which is 3 years leading up to entry to kindergarten. Program number 5 is making kindergarten a functional experience, where the child walks in and the shoes and socks are off, and there are uneven floors and there are climbing walls. And everything the child does is done to create functionality, not to allow them become dysfunctional and having to go through a program after school which they're not going to comply with. Prior to brushing their teeth, we give them some simple myofunctional exercises to do. Prior to nap time, we give them 1 or 2 minutes of guided gentle breathing so that they ease into their nap. While they're sleeping, the teacher walks around looking for open mouths. The teachers are the canaries in the coal mine, and they have report forms, and all of this is done with parental consent. And the parents are then told, we have noticed this and this and this and this. We recommend that you do something about it. IOP doesn't have any clinicians. We don't have any practitioners because all around the world, the requirements are different. So we create dream teams on the ground in Romania, in France, in Vietnam, people who are licensed and registered there, and we teach them what to do.
And how's it been so far?
You know, there's a beautiful old Greek proverb which says a society grows great when old men plant trees, knowing they will never enjoy the shade. And I'm planting trees, and there's a lot of shade coming. And it's people like you and your kids who will enjoy that shade. And that for me is enough.
I'm going to let you have the last word with that, Roger. That's outstanding. And I love the giving back that you're doing and leading by example with. And I thank you so much for your knowledge, just acknowledge you for your expertise. Like you said, you've taken a lot of arrows over the years and you keep fighting. And I think in an interesting way, it's made you stronger. You're clearly cut out for this. And the fact that you're still in your mid-80s fighting for this is just so admirable. And whether people want to agree with or disagree with the specific points you make, great. That's what academia is. That's what science is. That's what we're supposed to do. The fact is you are changing the world and you are getting at what I love, which is a proactive approach to try to help people be healthier and live healthier lives. And I commend you for it, and I thank you so much for taking this time to share it with my audience.
That's my pleasure, Mike. It was lovely spending time with you.
Well, same here. Thanks so much, Roger Price. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Take care now.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Doc Podcast. Be sure to visit theorthocoach.com to get access to ADA CERP recognized CE courses or to schedule a private one-on-one coaching session with me. Also, if you know of someone who would make a great guest for this show, or if you'd like to be a guest yourself, please email me at drmike@theorthocoach.com. And be sure to join the Doc community on Facebook for more great content. Thanks so much for listening, and always remember, you have been blessed with the ability to do amazing things.